Hi, welcome back to the Burnett City Homestead. I am starting a new series of videos that I would like to call Back to the Basics because I would like to share with everybody the things that we do here on the homestead other than the garden that help with saving money and saving health. And I would like to start the series with one of the most basic things you can do on the homestead, and that is a sourdough starter. All the bread that we bake here is sourdough bread. We make sourdough pancakes, we make sourdough cakes, sweet cakes, and flatbreads, which are not technically flatbreads because they have yeast in them, but they work like flatbreads do. But pretty much anything that you want to do that needs a leavening agent, you can use sourdough for. So to start your sourdough starter, you need to take a cup of flour. I use whole wheat. You can use white flour. The white flour will feed, the yeast will become more active more quickly with white flour, but the wheat flour will work, and that's what we use for all of our bread. You take a cup of the flour and a cup of filtered water. You always want to use filtered water because the chlorine that they put in the municipal water supplies will damage the yeast. So a cup of flour, a cup of water, mix them together and put them in a glass jar or a plastic tub if that's all you have. Anything that you can put a lid on that the lid does not have to stay tightly affixed to. I like to use mason jars because I use mason jars for pretty much everything. I even make my yogurt in mason jars. So you're going to let this sit out on your counter for 12 hours or 24 hours. Actually, I'm sorry, 24 hours. And then at the end of that 24 hours, you're going to remove half of the starter. Now there's going to be a little bit of yeast already becoming active in that because all flour has yeast on it already. And the warmer it gets and the more food it has, the more active it becomes. So after 24 hours, you're going to have a small amount of active yeast, but it's not going to be enough to really make a loaf of bread. So what we like to use with that is when I'm showing somebody how to make a starter here with family and friends, I always recommend that they use that for sourdough pancakes, which is really easy. You use it like any other kind of pancake recipe, except for instead of putting baking powder in it, it's already got the leavening agent in it. They're very tasty, they're tangy, just like any sourdough. So you can either discard it or use it for something else. It's just not ready for bread yet. So on the second day, you're going to want to remove half of what is in the jar. And you're going to want to put back 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of filtered water and mix it together, put the lid back on it, let it sit for 24 hours. On the third day, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to remove half of it and then put back a cup of flour and a cup of water. So your starter is going to increase over the days in size and volume, and you're going to notice that there's a lot more bubbles on top. You can see the bubbles already forming on this one. This one I just started this morning for a friend, and it's already becoming active. Sourdough is a wonderful thing. Some places have very good sourdough or wild yeast. Some places don't have the best of wild yeast, so it takes a while longer. 3 days is a general rule of thumb. On the third day, after the third day is complete, you can decide then whether you want to go ahead and make bread with it or whether you want to just put it away. If you're going to put it away, you put it in your refrigerator with the lid affixed to it, but not on so tight that gas cannot completely escape. So you don't want anything to get into it, but you want to allow some of the gas to get out if it has to, because it will stay active in the refrigerator. It's just not going to be as active as it would on the counter. But if you're going to use to make bread the first day, or the first day that the starter is active, you'll remove half of it, or however big of a loaf you're going to want to make. So say you're going to want to make a small loaf, then you'll remove a cup of the starter, and then you're going to put back into the starter a half a cup of flour and half a cup of water if you remove a cup. If you want to make a bigger loaf and you want to remove 2 cups of the starter, then you put back into it 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of water and mix it back in, and then let that sit for 12 hours before you put it back in your refrigerator. This starter is 10 years old, if you can believe that, and it still makes all the bread that we could eat. Now, this morning I took out from here 1 cup of the starter, so I only put back a half a cup and a half a cup. And then I made a ball. I added as much flour as it took, to make a nice ball here. Plus I added 2 pinches of salt. The salt you can add however much you want to, you like to it. I don't like to add too much salt to my family's diet, so I stay to a minimum. You want to have some salt in there to give it a little bit of flavor. But I can't tell you exactly how much flour you're going to have to use because that depends on where you live. Humidity affects it greatly. Anybody who's ever made breads or cakes or anything like that before knows how much humidity can affect the amount of flour you need to use. So I wish I could tell you exactly, but you can see how it looks. This is not kneaded in any way, shape, or form. It's just stirred together and then just kind of pushed together with my fingers. I'm going to leave it exactly like this. I'm going to cover it with a towel, and I'm going to let it sit for about 12 hours. After that time, I'm going to transfer it to a baking pan and let it sit for about another hour. And then I'm going to cook it at 400 degrees for usually about 40 minutes. This is the easiest type of sourdough loaf you can make. You don't have to knead it at all. It's not going to have that really super chewy crust, but it's going to be soft inside. And if you have good wild yeast where you live, it's going to have a ton of air pockets in it. It's going to be like the best sourdough that you can get at the grocery store. Now, if you want the really chewy crust, you can take this after about 12 hours and you can add some more flour to it and knead it until it becomes elastic. I do this sometimes if I'm making bread for other people or if I want to take the time to do that. It takes a lot of extra time, but it is worth it in every way. Sourdough bread can be made into probably 1,000 different types of bread. We like to add rosemary to it and make a nice rosemary and olive oil bread, just with a little bit of olive oil. That is an incredibly tasty bread, and your friends will look at it and say, however did you manage to do this, or where did you buy it from? And you're going to be very proud to know that you made it yourself. But you can also, if you want a really super sourdough bread, you can actually let it rise for more than the 12 hours. I have on occasion had a 3-day bread where I just added a little more flour and kneaded it every 12 hours or so, and then it was super sour, super fluffy, just amazing if you like sour bread. Or you can let it rise a little bit less, so it'll be a little bit less sour, and add raisins and cinnamon and a little bit of honey and make the best cinnamon raisin bread you've ever had. So once you get the idea of how to make sourdough bread, the options are unlimited. And we love to make an oat bread, which is mostly oatmeal and oat flour, and we just use the starter with that, and that makes an incredibly healthy, wonderful bread. So, oh, and just to remind you, when you're stirring it, always use wood, plastic, bamboo, and anything that is not metal, because you don't want the reaction. You don't want that bad flavor. So we will see you on our next episode of Back to the Basics, and I hope everybody is having a beautiful day. Goodbye.